Welcome, welcome. We hope you are having a great start to your week. Welcome to Lunch with a Leader. My name's Casey and I'm on our team here at North Star, and it is my honor to get to welcome you here to our November, really our Thanksgiving together. Before we get started with our time today, can we give a huge hand to Andy Duncan and his Chick-fil-A team for providing lunch today? They're always so incredible, and we love getting to partner with Andy in our community, and I know many of you know him and partner with him as well. So we are so thankful that they are here. One thing that I do want to let you know about before we get going with our time today is the Lunch with a Leader podcast that is releasing new episodes a couple times a month. One just came out last week. So if you're a podcaster, if you like to listen while you're driving, it's a great resource and a great leadership tool for you to be diving into. So it's Lunch with a Leader. And today we are going to continue in our Joshua story. And we're going to continue in this leadership journey that we've been on for the last couple months, examining Joshua's life and how it pertains to our spiritual leadership in the workplace. So you guys keep eating, keep connecting. Mike's going to be up here in just a moment to get us rolling in Joshua's life. We're so thankful that you're here, and let's get ready for a great afternoon together.
Well, hello, everybody. If I've never met you before, my name is Mike. It's an honor to look out here and see you. Why don't y'all give a hand to all the awesome people that are in the room today? You got some great people sitting around you. I hope you're getting to sit with some new people and meet some new people while we're here today. Today, we get to continue this series to the life of Joshua. So if it's your first time at Lunch with a Leader, let me tell you what this is about. This is about raising the spiritual temperature of groups in our community, from schools to businesses to government agencies. I would say raise the spiritual temperature of churches, but they should already have theirs raised. But anyway, but our goal is to say we have a bigger purpose that we work for. And there is a bigger reason of why we do what we do. And rather than us just doing what we do, let's learn lessons from those that have gone before us and learn principles that we can apply to our lives, that we don't have to make the same mistakes that other people have made, but we can learn from the good things that other people have done. So before we even get started today we're going to be talking about lessons learned from losses. How many of y'all have ever experienced a loss in your organization? Raise your hand if you've experienced a loss in your organization. Nobody likes losses, right? Nobody enjoys them. So before we even dive into our time today, I want you to talk at your table. Keep eating, talk. And I want you to talk about, why do we hate defeat so much as leaders? It's a quick one, quick little conversation, about a minute, 30 seconds. But why do we hate defeat so much as leaders? On your mark, get set, go. You can talk at your tables. All right, let me hear from you. What's some of the feedback came back at your table? Why do we hate defeat so much as a leader in an organization? What would you say? It's personal. We feel it personal. When you're not the leader, you hate it. But when you're the leader, you almost feel like it reflects, and it does in some ways, maybe reflect on you. So it's personal. What else? What's some of the other feedback came back from your tables? Say it again, Chief. Loss of control. May not follow you again in the future. What else does defeat do to? Yeah, sometimes defeat is like kicking over a rock and you don't like what comes out from under the rock. When you're winning, it covers everything. But defeat exposes. I am sure the Falcons locker room was interesting in Dallas yesterday, okay? Because you beat New Orleans the week before, and then you play yesterday, and you could have just not shown up, basically. It was and so I'm sure it exposed some maybe underlying things organizationally that were going on. Loss is a funny thing. None of us would ever choose it, but loss is something that defines us, possibly, if we let it, or we can learn from it. So I wrote down some thoughts about loss. When you lose, whatever it is, you think about quitting, don't you? How many of y'all, one of your instincts when you lose is to think, I don't even know if I want to do this anymore. How many of y'all ever felt like that before? It's like, I don't even know if I want to suit back up. Depending on how much like if you expected to lose, like it's something, on your P&L statement, you're like, I know it's gonna be a tough year. You're sort of prepared for it. But when something comes out of the blue, you think about quitting, you get angry, you blame. Sometimes as a leader, I wanna point around me and I wanna point to somebody else other than me. Sometimes I get sad, sometimes I question. It tests my resolve. Do I really wanna stick in there with this thing? Mope. I don't know if any of y'all ever mope, but you just start moping around, your lip drops, and you sort of a woe is me kind of thing. You know, it's funny. So Joshua has been on a mountaintop. Last month when we gathered, he had just defeated Jericho. Crazy, but they had walked around the walls for 7 days. The walls fell down. The people ran in, and it was a mountaintop experience. So now they're going up against an opponent, this little city called Ai, and this should be a cakewalk. I mean, this should be like you show up and go, boo, all right, and you should win the battle. It didn't work like that, though. The problem was they showed up at the battle. What Joshua didn't know is he had a soldier in his organization that wasn't on the team, right? You could call them, I've heard Ike, and any of y'all know Ike around our community at Must and Piedmont. Ike's referred to them as onboard terrorists, right? They're in your organization, but they're working against you. This guy, Achan, was working. So God laid out what the plan was. And when they pilfered the city, basically, when they won over the city, what Achan had done is he'd gone and stolen treasure for himself. So when Joshua gets ready to lead them into battle in Joshua chapter 7, what he doesn't know is everything's working against him. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Would you pray with me? I know you all cruised in the middle of a work day, full agendas, full calendars, full plates. You had to make yourself be here. Man, I think God's maybe got you here for a reason. Would you just take a second at your table today and just say, Lord, I want what you have for me today. Would you just pray that? Lord, I want what you have for me today. Father, I pray over these next few minutes together that we can see what happened with Joshua. We can learn lessons for our own journey. And Father, we can be better people and better leaders on the back end. And Father, the reality is we will all experience loss and losses, plural. We're all going to go through defeats. But Father, may we never let those defeats define who we are. And so, Father, speak to us, challenge us, and push us to be the people that you created us to be. And I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. A few lessons we learned from Joshua. Ready? Principle number one is this: I'm most vulnerable when I'm most successful. I am most vulnerable when I'm most successful. So I got a question for you. Why do we get blinded when we're successful? Somebody throw out some ideas. Why can we get blinded to realities when success is just falling on top of itself with you? Why does that blind us as leaders? We get lazy? Very good. What else? Prideful. We begin to think we did it. We begin to think we overestimate our abilities. What else? We get complacent. What else?
Put too much stock in the praise of the people around us.
Listen, we love the pats on the back. But I remember hearing an old football coach, Sam Rutigliano, say years ago when he spoke, a pat on the back and a swift kick in the rear end, the difference is about 6 inches, right? And so it's not that far between the two. We love the pats and the praise, but buddy, there's a back end coming to that, right? It's funny, winning is fun, but losses are part of life. We all like when everything's lined up. I mean, it's just falling into place. Everybody on your team buys into the mission. Everybody in your groups, they get it. Everybody in your organization is locked in. But all of a sudden you get a defeat. What was hidden by success gets exposed. Look with me at the story. Look at what it says, Joshua 6, right there in your outlines. So the Lord was with Joshua. So that's been the whole thing. God's been with him. God's using him. So the Lord was with Joshua and his reputation spread throughout the land. I mean, he is like Joshua's the guy. Everybody is meeting Joshua. Now I love chapter 7. But Israel violated the instructions about things set apart from the Lord. And a man named Achan had stolen some of those dedicated things. So the Lord was very angry with the Israelites. Now, the hard part about this was unbeknownst to Joshua. Here's the hardest part of leadership. Ready? One person who is not you can make a decision that affects you. One person having a bad day in a bad moment can make a decision that doesn't go on everybody else. It comes to your desk. It comes to your table. It comes to your office. It visits your home. That's just the way leadership is. That's the mantle. When they say the mantle of leadership, and here's the hard part, you don't know it till you know it. And when you know it, you just go, you feel it in your gut when somebody else is going through something. You're like, oh my gosh, I get it, right? We've got to know this. We are most vulnerable when we're most successful because our guard comes down. We take our eye off what we're working for. Maybe we're not as diligent about things. It's interesting that Joshua, before they went in across they took down the Jericho walls. Remember, they prayed and they marched, but when they went into Ai, they just went in. There was no spiritual preparation. There was no, Lord, is there anything I need to know? Dude, they just were like, okay, well, we won the big battle. Ai is nothing. I mean, Ai is a tiny little place and we're going to overrun them. In fact, he only took a few guys with him because he thought he had it. I love this quote by Og Mandino. I will not allow yesterday's success to lull me into today's complacency, for this is the great foundation of failure. The reality is yesterday was great, but today is a brand new day. So anybody who coaches teams know once your team the prior year was successful, the hardest thing to do is convince the group coming the next year, you don't get to pick up where they left off. So it's been great in Atlanta winning the world championship in baseball. Hard part is they got to go back to spring training and everybody's 0-0. Everybody starting over. You don't get to pick up where you left off. Success can blind you, right? And success can make you, and I want you to write this whole thought down, success can cause you to forget why you do what you do. You just totally get distorted. If you go back to Mike Smith with the Atlanta Falcons and ask him where things came off the rails after they came a game from the NFC Championship game that they lost that didn't make it to the Super Bowl, he said, we became obsessed about the Super Bowl and we forgot the process that made us good. That's what Mike would tell you. We became obsessed with the Super Bowl. Casey and I spent a lot of time with them during those years, and he would say, he would outwardly say, looking back, we got off the rails when all we thought about was the success of the Super Bowl, and we forgot the process, the day-by-day process that got us there. We forgot it. Principle number 2, ready? Don't assume everyone on your team is on board. Oh, dear Lord. All right, don't assume everybody's on board. Why can't we assume everybody's on board? Because they're not. Because they're not on board. How many of you as a leader, and we're not naming names, you're not hollering them out, have experienced what it's like to have somebody on your team not buy in and almost they work against you? Raise your hand. And the reason I ask you to raise your hand is universal. We make the assumption, well, everybody's with me. And I want you to write this down. I shared this one other time. I want you to write down cave people. All right, cave. I just want you to write that down, cave people. Within every church, within every team, within every organization, there are cave people. Mike, what are cave people? They're constantly against virtually everything, all right? And so they exist within every organization. They're there. And they're not on board. They don't buy in. And it may not be your coaching staff. It may be a player who's influential. It may not be your key administrators, but it may be a teacher on a hallway who everybody respects. It may be in your business. It may be a supervisor out in the field who's poisoning the people around him. Achan's decision was a choice that he made to go out and work. He did something bad, right? God told him not to do it. He just went and did it. He did something bad. Look at the way it says. Early the next morning, Joshua brought the tribes of Israel before the Lord, and the tribe of Judah was singled out. Then the clans of Judah came forward, and the clan of Zerah was singled out. Then the families of Zerah came forward, and the family of Zimri was singled out. Every member of Zimri's family was brought forward person by person, and Achan was singled out. Then Joshua said to Achan, my son, give glory to the Lord, the God of Israel, by telling the truth. Make your confession and tell me what you've done. Don't hide it from me. Right? So here's our lesson under principle number 2. Stay engaged. This is really big for me too. Stay engaged. 36 people died in this attack. It wasn't like, oh, we lost. There were 36 people that died during this attack. So Joshua has to deal with it. Every leader, it shows up at your table. It shows up at your desk. And we've all had these meetings where it's like, all right, I got to deal with it. What's the mistake as a leader? And let's think about leadership. What's the mistake Joshua could have made in this? What could he have done that wouldn't have been right? He confronted Achan and he dealt with it. What could he have done that wouldn't have been right? Somebody raise their hand. He could have killed him, all right? Could have. What else could he have done? He could have not dealt with it at all right? Coach Preston, you coached how many years of college basketball? 20 years of college basketball. How did you see that play out, even on coaching staffs that you're on, where there was a problem and people didn't deal directly with the problem, they worked around it? Unpack that a little bit.
Little things that you didn't take care of eventually became bigger things, and bigger things became uncontrollable. Snowflake, snowball, avalanche.
Write down, Mike Lynch said, snowflake, snowball. That's really good. Snowflake, snowball, avalanche. That's really good. All right, let's talk about this. Why do we hate dealing with it? Why do we hate the personal confrontation? It's uncomfortable. Why else? Why do we not like that? What would you say? It's a risk. You damage the relationship. It's frustrating. So our tendency, okay, I'm gonna tell you I'm not gonna speak our. My tendency is to address the group hoping the one gets it. Y'all ever done this before? Right? So I tell everybody, because I don't want to confront, I'm all about winning friends, all right? And so I don't want to confront, but the one who you want to get it, do they ever get it? They never get it. Never. In fact, I don't know how many times I think back on coaching all these years, and there's a problem, and I bring the kids together, and I just rip them good. Every kid who does something right is apologizing. They're like, Coach, I'm sorry, I should have had a better. Hey, you're fine. The kid that I wanted to get it has no idea I was talking about him. Zero. That's why Joshua looks at him and said, don't hide what you've done, Achan. Give glory to the Lord and come clean. Because Joshua knows this. The whole nation can be ruined by a weak link in the chain. True? A weak link in the organization can destroy all the forward momentum. I love what Maxwell said. As much as any team likes to measure itself by its best people, the truth is that the strength of the team is impacted by its weakest link. A weak link will eventually come to light. You lose the respect of the best when you don't deal properly with the worst. That's worth coming to lunch for. You don't get the best out of the best if you don't deal with the worst. Okay, I'm gonna tell you, so this is self-confession. Welcome to my therapy session. That's been one of my weakest parts of leadership. And here's what happens. When we don't do what Joshua did, we become the organizational lid, right? And it takes the energy out of everybody else. Joshua dealt with it. Joshua said, listen, I should have seen this, but Achan, you did it and you're responsible. Point number 3, failure is often a useful tool God uses to show us where we need to grow. And that was the principle somebody hit earlier. It shows us growth opportunities. All right, so let's let everybody off the hook. Yes or no question. Will we ever be the leader that we're supposed to be in full? Yes or no? No, you're never going to master it all. You're not. So I want you to write down this, I'm always in process. I'm always in process. So I remember interviewing Sam Chan, a great leader on the podcast a few years ago. And I asked Sam, I said, if there's one lesson every leader needs to know, and he works literally when I tell you, so I'll give you an idea. So I called him a couple years ago. I had 3 or 4 pastors. I wanted to get together with mentoring with Sam. And I said, I would love for you to do mentoring for us. And his assistant's like, he would love it. And we'd pool our resources and meet a couple times a year. And I called and said, well, I think I got a group together. Tell me what it'd be. And she said, it would be $5,000 a session. And I said, oh, that's awesome for all of us. And she said, no, per person. I'm like, I don't think that's gonna work. All right, so I don't think that's gonna work. That's the level he works at, and he stays very busy. So here's what Sam said. Sam said, every leader needs to know this. You're always learning, unlearning, and relearning. I don't know any better way to say it. As a leader, sometimes losses cause us to unlearn what we've been doing, to relearn it. That's just the way that it is. I've got to unlearn, I got to learn, and I got to relearn. It's constant. Losses and failure are a tool. Let me ask you this though. Why are more people ruined by success than by failure though? Failure doesn't ruin us. Failure's got an interesting way of working out the best. Why does failure make us better? Why do we get better from that? What would you say? We learn how not to do it. What else? You gain, how many of y'all have enough humility now? It's like, all right, I've got enough losses, right? We gain humility. What else do we get from it? We grow from it. Man, we are better people from it. You are winning, you forget what it's like to lose. And then when you lose, you remember. Makes you more empathetic, makes you more understanding, makes you get it a little bit more. Here's the lesson: stay teachable. Stay teachable. Don't be a leader who knows everything. You know what my favorite parts about great leaders? They're always learners, man. They never act like they got it together. Why does Brian Snitker win over the city of Atlanta? Because he doesn't act like he knows everything. He's just a guy. And he talks about his failures and he talks about his successes, and he's just a guy. Stay teachable. Look at Joshua chapter 7 there. But the Lord said to Joshua, get up. I love this. Why are you lying on your face like this? Israel sinned and they've broken my covenant. They've stolen some things that I've commanded must be set apart from me. And they not only stolen them, but they've lied about it and hidden the things among their own belongings. That's why the Israelites are running from the enemies in defeat. For now, Israel itself's been set apart for destruction. I will not remain with you any longer unless you destroy the things among you that were set apart for destruction. So Joshua, here's what you got to do. You got to relearn how you are as a leader. You got to go find that stuff and you got to destroy it. But my favorite part of it is Joshua, pick up your lip. Let's get back to work. All of us will stick out our lip when we lose. The question isn't, do we sting from the loss? The question is, do we stay in the loss? Joshua made a choice to get up. I love this soccer player's quote. This is the first time you've ever seen a soccer player's quote at Lunch with a Leader. All right, so I want you to read this. There's no doubt in my mind that there are many ways to be a winner, but there's only one way to be a loser, and that is to fail and not look beyond the failure, to stay in it. So a lot of this Joshua series came from a gentleman named Richard Blackaby, who wrote probably the best book on spiritual leadership, but he had some lessons in Joshua. I had Richard on the podcast. It'll come out in January. But we talked about this specific scene, and this guy's brilliant, the Battle of Ai. I want you to listen to this conversation, would you?
You know, and you think about, and it wasn't all good for Joshua. There were some tough times.
Yeah.
You know, even the walls of Jericho and how crazy that deal looked. And then you had when they lost the battle. When Joshua's troops lost because of the sin and disobedience, what did he show most as a leader, that character and how it came out? What would you say?
Well, you know, it's interesting. I mean, because what did they lose? Like 30 some men at Ai. Like, I mean, compared to the thousands that they had, it's like, but he, I mean, he's fallen on the ground. He's crying out to God. He's tearing his clothes. It's like, Joshua, can't you take a little setback, you know? But what he's saying is that indicates to me that God's not for us right now. God's not blessing us. And it terrified Joshua to lead without God's presence and blessing. And, you know, for a lot of us, we're not terrified by that. There are pastors, God has not grown their church in decades, but they should have been on the ground weeping and crying out to God years ago, but they've just made excuses. They've just said, that's, you know, whatever. Joshua, he didn't tolerate failure. I mean, he knew there was a reason. Like, God promised victory, and so if God's not given victory, he knows full well the problem is not with God. And so what I like about Joshua is he gets to the root of the matter. You know, I try to help pastors of churches that have been in decline for 20 years. And you would think if you've been in a church that hasn't grown in 20 years that they'd be so humble and so open and desperate to find the answers. Most of the time, though, they're defensive. They don't want you to look at their leadership. They don't want you to say it might be them that's the problem. They want to blame everybody else. And Joshua, I love that about him. He got on his knees and said, God, tell us what the problem is and we'll get it right. And so God does tell them. They deal with the problem right away. And that's the last setback really you ever hear that Joshua faces. And, I just think, wouldn't that be amazing if some leaders who've had some setbacks would just act like Joshua, humble themselves and say, I don't want to spend the rest of my life being beat up and defeated as a leader. God, just tell me what the problem is and I'll deal with it. However costly, whatever sacrifice has to be made. I tell you, we live in an age right now where leaders, we can't afford to be ineffective. And there are things holding back a lot of Christian leaders today that they're still maybe holding a job. They're still getting some stuff done, but there's so much more that could be done if they would just be honest like Joshua and say, God, tell me what's holding my leadership back. I'll get it. I'll deal with it today. Just imagine what would happen in America if every Christian leader just got before God and said, whatever's holding me back from being all the leader that you created me to be, just let's deal with it today. And I want to be free to be the man or woman of God that you created me to be.
So I want to camp on this a little bit. Lewis and you spoke up here a second ago. You went from the highest of high. How many national championship teams were you a part of? 2 national championship teams. To a few years ago, and we talked about it in one of our early Lunch with Leaders, that you ended up losing your job. What lessons did you learn from loss that you couldn't have learned if you kept winning national championships? What would you say? Self-awareness.
Stand up, Coach. Stand loud and proud, please. You want me to stand up? Yes, sir. Self-awareness, number one. I shrank my circle.
In what way? How'd you shrink your circle?
When I was in coaching, I could call 500 people, and probably 490 we get back. Within 6 months, I was down to 10. Today it's 7. And I still know all by name. Right? So you learn that. You find out who your true friends are versus acquaintances. Third thing was I got balance and perspective back out of that. The fourth thing was, and George and I talked about this recently, stop taking myself too seriously. And I think one of the things in regards to that, like we talked about humility earlier, right? Because I always say this now, anybody I speak to, especially coaches, you're 2 injuries away from being very mediocre. I don't care if you're Coach K, I don't care if you're Phil Jackson, Frank Vogel with the Lakers, you're 2 injuries away from being mediocre. So always keep that in perspective. I will say one thing about Brian Snicker that probably stuck out to me more than anything else this year. When they lost, he took the hits. When they won, he gave all the praise.
That's right.
That right there was probably the best sign of leadership. And when Freddie Freeman hugged him, because Freddie Freeman, and we talked about this, and he was the one that went and saved his job. I can't imagine as a coach that type of feeling, like that was the guy who stuck with me when everybody in the organization wanted me out. And then he's the guy sitting there when he won the National League pennant, he's got the shirt on, and then winning the World Series. So just those things right there.
That's a good word. Y'all give a hand to Coach Preston. That was good stuff. I can't imagine how many the list would have been if I'd actually prepared you for the question. I don't know how you came up with 5. It's very impressive, man. It's very impressive. It's funny, though, we learn so much from loss. Losses are a part of life. They're going to happen. The question is, do they define you? That's the question. Will we stay in the, it's sort of like grief. We just did a grief night the other night. Grief is one of those things, you're going to go through the stages of grief, which is part of the process. But the problem is when you pull up a chair at one of them and you stay there. What God was telling Joshua was, Joshua, you've got a country to lead. You got a group of people to lead. You got to get up and keep moving. You can't lose your vision. You got to relearn some things. You got to unlearn some things. You got to do some things different. I'm sure Joshua's going, maybe I don't know my troops real well. Maybe Joshua had gotten to the point of leadership where he had gotten distant from the people. I don't know. We were on our call this morning on a baseball call. We had about 60 guys, I think, on this morning, pro scouts and college coaches. And one of the coaches looking back, he's retired now, looking back, he said, if I could go back, I would spend more time individually with my players. If I could go back. I spent too much time with boosters and too much time raising money and too much time with all these things, and I forgot. And it is easy in leadership to get distant from your people, right? It's easy. I mean, because you got a lot of demands. I'm sure Joshua felt the same way. But Joshua had to keep moving. Finally, number 4, no defeat is permanent and no mistake is beyond remedy when you surrender to the Lord. No defeat is permanent. No mistakes beyond remedy when you surrender to the Lord, which that's the caveat of the whole thing. I remember hearing John Maxwell say this years ago, failure is never fatal till you let it become final. Failure is never fatal till you let it become final. As a leader in whatever it is, I mean, there's people literally from KSU to FCA over here to Piedmont Church to local businesses to elementary schools to high schools to college coaches. We got everything in between in this room. Loss is a part of all our journeys, but no defeat is permanent and no mistake is beyond remedy when you surrender it to the Lord. So here's our lesson. Stay dependent. You can't do it on your own. If you're going to own all leadership, you will not last long. I want you to write down 3 words. Ready? Sprint, not marathon. Sprint, not marathon. If you try to do it on your own, you're going to run the sprint. You're not going to run a marathon, and you're not going to last. You're going to be a flash. You're going to come, and you're going to come fast. In 10 years from now, nobody will know who you are. But the marathon runners, they get it. They know failure's part of it. They know there's some hills. They know there's a journey out in front. And they stay dependent. They know they can't do it by themselves. They're dependent on the Lord. So I don't know where all of your spiritual journeys are. That's the part I don't know. My challenge to you is this. Don't do this by yourself. Don't do this by yourself. I want you to write down a couple things, ready? Have a daily walk with the Lord. Mike, I don't even know where to start on that. All you've got to do is walk up here and see me after this time's over. I'll help you. There's apps that were just designed for people like me and you. I've got one on my phone called YouVersion, and it's a daily Bible reading plan. We put out a thing at North Star called Digging Deeper, right? That's a day-by-day journey to help you with your walk with the Lord. Second thing I would tell you is this. Have someone in front of you learn from. I want you to write that down. Have someone in front of you learn from. If you're in the police group that's in this room from a couple of our different cities, man, have somebody out in front of you that does what you do that you can learn from. They're mentors. Have someone beside you that you're running with. And have someone behind you that you're pouring into. If you will stay dependent on the Lord, walk with Him daily, have someone in front of you that you're learning from, someone beside you that you're running with, and someone behind you that you're pouring into, you're going to run the race well. If I only have somebody behind me I'm pouring into, but I'm not learning from anybody, you become pompous and you think you know everything. You're 30 years old with all the answers to life, and it just doesn't work like that. The people I want to learn from are the people that limp a little bit. The people that got some war wounds. They've got some, they got some shrapnel in the leg, and they can tell you what they did they shouldn't have done. I want to see you finish well. Next month, as we wrap up Joshua next month. On December the 15th, I think it's Monday the 15th, we'll be in here same time, and we're going to talk about the biggest leadership principles that we learned from the life of Joshua, because this has been a year plus we've been in Joshua's life. As we boil down his life, we were working on it this morning. It is so good. What are the biggest leadership principles that we can learn from Joshua? And it's something I know I need, and I know we all need. Let me pray for you guys. Father, thank you for the opportunity to be in this room today. Father, thank you for being with men and women who say, I can't do this by myself, but I sure want to make a difference. And I sure want to live for a purpose bigger than me. So Father, today I pray over them as they get ready to go. God, I pray every day they stay dependent on you. Father, I pray every day they stay close to the people that they serve and work with. And that, Father, when defeat visits our door and losses come around the corner, Father, they don't surprise us and they don't define us. But we get up, we wipe off, and we keep working, and we keep moving, and we keep going to be the people that you created us to be. So Father, I bless them today. I pray over them today, and I thank you for them today. It's in Jesus' name that I pray. Amen. Well, guys, you have blessed us by being here today. Would you join me again and thank our amazing Chick-fil-A team for providing lunch for us today? I'll see you on December. There's little cards on your tables with all the dates for the year. If you want to grab one of those. Yes, ma'am. The first lesson was stay hungry. Stay hungry. Yeah, I missed that one. Doggone it. Stay hungry. Stay hungry. We love you guys. Have fun. Have a great day. We hope to see y'all back in December.